We hear a lot about it, but the question arises, what is cultural transformation? Cultural change. It's not as simple as everybody thinks. Do you know that there are some folks who think, well, we have just figured it out. Everything that we have been focusing on isn't going to take us where we need to go now. We'll just explain it to everybody, they'll see the sense of it, and the cultural transformation will be done. Won't it? No, it won't. In order to discuss cultural transformation, how about we just start with a simple definition of culture? Now, the definition that we use at KSP Partnership is that a culture is a commonly accepted set of norms, behaviors, and values. Commonly accepted, which means that everybody agrees to them. And as a result, the behaviors that result are consistent and expected. You know that awful feeling when you walk in a room and you realize everybody seems to know what to do, when to do it, who they can do it with, who they really can't do it with, except you. That's because that room full of people has a common culture. Think of cultural transformation as this. It takes the culture that you have and moves it a little bit at a time to where you want the culture eventually to be. And that incremental movement, oh, that is so important. Because remember, changing the beliefs, changing the behaviors, these are all a little less simple than people think, and definitely not easy. We usually use the Flamholtz and Randall model for cultural change, and it's multi-layered. In essence, though, the key to this is this. Most people make this mistake at least once. In trying to change the culture, they change the behavior. And that'll work for a little while. But if you ask people to change their behavior and the underlying fundamental belief that is the cause of that behavior isn't changed, isn't shifted just a little bit, well, that old behavior, that's going to come sneaking back. Can't be helped. So cultural transformation means that you are willing to address the change in increments. That's one. Two, figure out what is it in the environment that you're operating in that causes a particular behavior to be so common in it. One of my first independent contractor engagements was at a large car manufacturer. And they wanted their creatives to learn a little bit more about the structure of project management. I suspect I'm not alone in saying this. When I think creative, I do not think structure at the same time. It's just kind of counterintuitive. But I was willing, I was able, they were paying the fee. I get down there and I got to think about promptness. I'm a project manager. What do you want? So even as I walked in the door, I thought, well, I'm only a little bit early. So I started setting up the room, doing all these things at about 8 o'clock, which is when the class was supposed to start. I wasn't terribly surprised I was the only person in the room. But I have to tell you, at 8:15, I was a little worried. I walked out of the hallway, went down to the office and said, hey, we've got the right date, right? The class is supposed to start today. And is there something that happened in the organization that I should be aware of? Because nobody's in the room. And she looked at me and said, oh, yes, well, they kind of operate on a different clock. You see, for that group of people, collaboration, creativity, and ongoing communication is so important that unfortunately the clock kind of doesn't make the list. Give it about 10 minutes. I went back to my room. I was a little puzzled. But sure enough, over the next 10 minutes, people started wandering in because the culture in that place is founded on creativity, collaboration, and ongoing communication, which means that if you run into somebody in the hallway and you're having a really productive and exciting discussion, well, you keep that discussion going. And if you happen to be a little late for a meeting, it's okay. Would I necessarily want to change that culture to one that values punctuality more than creativity and collaboration? Trying to make the clock just as important as those two other things? Probably not. So in order to change people's behavior, you have to change their underlying beliefs, which means you have to figure out just exactly what it is. And that can be a little bit challenging. This isn't something that tends to show up in surveys. It requires examination and is best done when you get some of your colleagues together to investigate it all together. Last but not least, have an end game in mind. You see, the culture is going to evolve, whether you make any decisions about it, whether you consciously implement a cultural transformation or not, that culture is going to evolve. The question is, are you going to be happy with it? Is it going to be as productive as one that you have made choices to build? That you have, where you have reinforced the things that you believe are going to help your people make better decisions, work better together, and produce quality products for the project quicker, in part because they care so much, and in part because they're working together instead of in little silos all by themselves. So what is cultural transformation? Well, in KSP Partnership, we believe that cultural transformation is the key to actually getting your teams to higher performance levels. It can be done. We've watched it happen. We can't say we made it happen. We just help you create an environment where it can happen. So if you find these tips and suggestions useful, if you find the topics that we discuss here useful and interesting, please, I don't know which side of the screen it's on, like or subscribe. And if you have any suggestions, my contact information is at the very end of the video, and I'd be delighted to hear from you. My name is KimiKSP. This video was brought to you by the Leadership Driven Project Management Academy, and we really appreciate your joining us. Thanks.